everybody. Thank you for having me again. So James and I are working on this paper, which is overcoming the digital divide. It's an offshoot of my PhD work, which was looking at women in informal settings in developing countries and how they navigate new innovations to improve their livelihoods. And one of the questions that I deliberately asked them because of my work with Inspire and also because technology is happening in real time in life right now was questions to do with technology and how they're applying technology in their work, in helping themselves and in their livelihoods. And so this is more, I think, I am kind of, I feel like this is more of the application of all the wonderful technical stuff that we've talked about in the morning. And this is the kind of work that everybody can contribute to, because in developed countries, you can correct me, those terms, like, you know, in the West, for instance, the percentage of say the digital divide is smaller, whereas in countries that are coming up, low-income countries, the digital divide is wider. And so I'll just dive into the into my presentation. So when we look at the context, by way of introduction, my work was carried out in Kenya. Kenya is it's quite unequal, and it's also a low-income country. There is evidence of the increasing role of information and communication technology in development, but gender inequality continues to exist and persist, especially in rural areas and in the low-income areas. So let's just kind of looking at it in terms of statistics. So over 70% of the population in Kenya lives in rural or low-income areas, which is huge. So that's a very huge chunk of the population. And, globally, it's, the rhetoric is how important the digital literacy is for, accessing education, for livelihoods, for agriculture, and nearly all aspects of our life. And we've also kind of touched on AI, and I think there's a little bit more on AI coming in later. And so the question is, with e-learning, how can women in developing countries harness these opportunities, these technologies, to improve their livelihoods and to have so that they can get better opportunities. Okay. So to break it down further, so when I asked the questions, I was looking at the role that e-learning could play as a tool for empowerment. And in theory, e-learning can be used to break barriers that exist from before, from education systems, from sociocultural dynamics that make women have less access to education completion, access to resources, and also therefore curtail their future opportunities towards digital inclusion generally. And this is kind of in the development world, like the World Bank and the United Nations and other larger international development organizations. This is quite a concern because, yet again, especially to realize the SDGs, women need to be on board. So there are a few case studies and initiatives that are ongoing. So there is some work in healthcare, which say monitoring, say pregnancy or monitoring children's symptoms, and then or monitoring their inoculations and vaccinations, etc. That is already in practice. And this is facilitated by the fact that the mobile penetration is quite high. And I'll come back to that because there's the mobile penetration versus internet and etc. and the challenges that this poses on e-learning broadly. So those case studies are quite interesting. There's also some case studies to do with education where school programs are, especially after the post-COVID period and COVID period and then post-COVID, where programs were created for online dissemination, and some of these are now available. Whether they access or not, those are the problems that now that this paper is querying. And so therefore, how can e-learning be leveraged to give women in Kenya's low-income areas better access to education and sustainable livelihoods? So the theoretical framework that I have employed and I work with, and I think is quite comprehensive, is the capabilities approach theory by Amartya Sen and Martha Nussbaum. And it is the capability approach. The previous theories of change all had a large emphasis on income. And once there was income, there would be change in livelihoods, and people's lives would be improved. But then that didn't happen. And it then turns out that the issue is overemphasizing income means that a lot of, there's no focus on other areas of life that makes life worth living. And so the capabilities approach debunks this whole idea of income particularly, or just fulfilling desires to this whole portfolio of needs that are necessary for people to choose from to have the lives that they want to live. And if you want any more on capabilities approach, I can go on with that at a later stage. If you have any questions, I can expand more. But those are the basic tenets. So with the capabilities, it's all about functions. And so, for example, education, the ability to read is a function. Education is a capability. And so the ability to move, like, access to a bicycle is a function. Mobility is a capability, And so capabilities are much more broader terms. Functions are the small beings and doings that we do and be every day that make, that create the spectrum of our life's choices, that we're then able to live lives that we consider to be useful. Okay. So next, we can look at the barriers that women face. Now, the barriers that women in developing countries face are, they are an extrapolation of kind of general global barriers facing women, stemming from inequality. So aspects such as low income limits internet access. So in developing countries, 42% of the population on average are able to, so in a country like Kenya, 42% of the population on average access the internet. And of these 42%, less than 20% are like 20% women are less likely than men to access the internet. So only about 35% of women in Kenya have internet access compared to 45% of men. And then the skills gap, just born of lower education attainment and past inequalities, means that digital literacy, even when devices are available, cannot be fully utilized. So then obviously low income means affordability issues and barriers to that. And then also cultural gender norms limits women's time and mobility, making it harder for them to access digital tools and education in many communities. Cultural expectations may prioritize men's access to technology, which further widens the gap. So in terms of digital inclusion, so more broadly, while we're enthusiastic about technology and how this applies and how women can access it, it's exciting on one hand, but on the other hand, we've talked earlier, there's the issue of ethics and risks that come with that. And so the exciting part, every time I delve, when I look into that, what technology is now and what we can do, and ChatGPT and all that, most of the view is that developing countries can leapfrog, because we don't have to reinvent the wheel, like if if it's the wheel's already invented, we could leapfrog. But the gaps still exist, in education, when to, how to also as a continent interact with technology, and how also as a continent own some of the structure that is necessary to for technology to disseminate. So those are issues of the big organizations and companies setting up there, mean that we lack agency, and so therefore policies around digital inclusion and ethics are necessary. And then also whilst doing that, also ensuring that even at the personal level, we in the process of collecting or data or building our own structures, infrastructure, and knowledge base, where kind of have learning from what's happening and putting the necessary ethical considerations in place. So in terms of policy recommendations, just 1 second. So in terms of policy recommendations, like I mentioned earlier, there is the need for infrastructure investment, which means affordable internet, like within the context of like women in rural areas or developing or low income areas, affordable internet access, maybe creating digital hubs for them to access so that they can also be part of this technological evolution that is happening. And therefore, the necessity of gender sensitive policies. There's a good example in some countries like Rwanda that have tech village that has been funded through public-private partnerships and is thriving, and it's kind of pulling in people, young people from neighboring countries, because the infrastructure and the setup is such that it is almost a globally recognized tech space that is producing African origin people who can kind of work on a global scale back and bring all this back to Africa. So that's an example of a way that we can kind of start there and then ensure that women are also part of this. Women and girls are also part of this. And also community engagement. That is kind of where my work lies. And so that is looking at women. And in the past, I've talked a lot about informality. In Kenya, nearly, the statistics are usually the same for poverty and informality, which is like 70%. But I think in Kenya right now, it's almost 90% of livelihoods are informal. So it's the whole country. There's a thing called Hustler Fund. It is phenomenal how welfare has been relegated to the people.
Excuse me, Linda, there is a question here. Yeah, the question is concerning family non-support. Are you aware of a difference to hinder girls from the male and female family members?
A lot depends on the level of, and this is where it's called, it's the intersecting forms of inequality. So there is gender-based inequality, and then there's class-based inequality. So in middle class and well-off families, there is no difference in girls accessing technology or education and boys accessing technology and education. But when household incomes are scarce, there is the tendency to assume that education for women is unnecessary because they will get married and their husbands will take care of them. But it is important to educate the boy because the boy will need to take care of the family and keep the family name. And so they will some families invest more in the boy than the girl. And this is still ongoing. It's still being fought, but it is ongoing. So With primary schools are free. At least, I mean, there's free primary education in Kenya. But secondary education is not free. So at that stage, a lot of girls kind of start dropping off because they are not being sufficiently taken care of or guided into education.
Thank you.
So I think I have finished everything because I kind of talk in a rolling fashion.